So very good afternoon to everyone who is joining in. Before we begin, let's wait a little longer for the rest of the viewers who will be joining us shortly. Okay, we just concluded our reading session earlier this morning. If you're interested, we have our reading sessions usually at 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. for our morning session. And then afterwards, we move on to our practice paper. So if you're interested in our reading sessions, you can always join us earlier in the day. We'll go through a short reading passage before looking at some recent news articles for current affairs and general knowledge. So without further ado, let's get started with today for our new practice paper. Today's practice paper comes from Tao Nan School. Comes from the Far East, Tao Nan School. Anyone in our viewers here are from Tao Nan? I think very recently, Tao Nan School has benefited from the opening of the Thomson East Coast Line, where they have a train station very near to the vicinity of their school now. So this is a paper taken from 2023 that is pitched towards its P5 levels for end of year. And yes, I'm saying it's P5 end of year right now, but as we go through the questions later on, I think we will come to realize that the questions here are actually pretty difficult for the average 11-year-old, right? So this is something that will be very useful, not just for our P5s in the live stream for today, but even for the P6s who are revising for PSLE, even for our older viewers who are also interested in brushing up on language fundamentals. I'm willing to put money on the bet that there are some questions over here that will trip up even those who think that they are already done with their primary school education. They think that they've learned everything they have from primary school English. Well, guess what? There will be some questions here that will definitely trip you up along the way. But let's not get ahead of myself. Let's get started. We'll go through today with our grammar section. Starting off, question 1. Abram and Noah blanked each other at the camp last week. Abram and Noah blanked each other at the camp last week. What are some ways that we can answer this question? What are some clues we can look at? We see last week over here. Last week tells us a point in time, right? When did this take place? It took place in the past, right? Last week. So this gives us the clue that the verb we need over here should obey the past tense. Past tense, and it's an act that has already been completed, right? So that should be option 3, befriended. Let me get a highlighter out. They befriended each other at the camp last week. So this is the simple part. This is the part that I think everyone should have gotten. Now my next question for everyone is this blank over here, each other. When do we use each other? When do we use one another? When do we use each other? When do we use one another? Surely there's a difference between the two, right? Or are they just interchangeable? Do they mean the same thing? When do you use each other? When do you use one another when referring to multiple parties or multiple subjects over here? If you think you have the answer, feel free to drop it in the chat. If you don't think you know the answer, also feel free to drop in the chat that you don't know, right? Perhaps the first sign that this paper is not as easy as you think it's going to be. Use each other. Each other is used only when there are two subjects or two parties. Okay. My best friend and I were talking to each other when there are just two parties. However, one another is used when there are more than two parties or subjects in the question. The classmates were talking to one another. Unless you only have two people in your class, then you only have it as each other. Okay, so well done. Thank you very much, Sherman, for the gifter badge. Thank you very much for the number 1 gifter badge. Glad to know that thank you. Okay. So this is a very useful distinction over here to understand when do you use each other, when do you use one another in the context of a sentence. So this is something that we can think about also moving forward in our daily conversational English. When do you use each other, when do you use one another? Question 2. The king was sad as he did not have blank freedom to explore the land. Okay. So the king did not have freedom. Over here, looking at freedom, freedom is being defined over here as a noun, but not just any kind of noun. If you have to quantify it, it's an uncountable noun. What do I mean by uncountable? That means you cannot enumerate freedom out by its individual parts. You cannot measure out freedoms like 1 freedom, 2 freedoms, 3 freedoms. So it's uncountable. So you're looking for a quantifier over here that is used to indicate uncountable nouns. Between our options over here, few and many are used for countable nouns. Let me write this down. Countable nouns. Okay, maybe it's a bit small. I'll shift it along the way. Few and many are used for countable nouns, while little and much are used for uncountable nouns. For example, when you're in school, you have little freedom because you have to obey the rules in school, so it's an uncountable noun. So it seems that we have to choose between options 2 and options 4 because freedom is an uncountable noun. So which should we use over here? In this case, since the king was unable to explore the land, this tells us that he did not have much freedom at all. So that is option 4, much freedom. So this question, I would say the quantifier part is pretty cut and dry. The difficulty comes in you understanding when do you use many, when you use much. And on the other side also when you use few, when you use little. Question 3. The teacher's words of encouragement were still blank in her ears. So what is useful over here is still. What does still tell us? Still tells us that it is continuous, right? Something that's still happening. So among these 4 verb forms of the word ring, the correct verb form that is in the continuous is option 4, ringing. Still ringing in her ears. Question 4. The show blank, please be quiet. Please be quiet over here. Please be tells us that this verb over here should be in the present perfect form. When you use present perfect tense is used when referring to an action that took place prior to the present. And in this case here, we are using has begun. The show has begun, please be quiet. Okay. Alright, for question 5, perhaps it's time for you to take a shot at it. Alright, question 5 is on the screen over here. If Rajan blank about competition, he would definitely take part in it. If Rajan blank about a competition, he would definitely take part in it. Among these 4 options over here, which do you think best fits the blank here? Okay, I'll give you a minute. Which verb tense of the word know best fits the blank of the conditional if? Okay, take a minute to consider. And once you think you have your answer, you can indicate your answer by its option number in the comment in the live stream chat, or you can write down the word itself in the chat as well. Okay. Which answer do you think best fits this blank of the conditional statement? Okay. There seems to be some hesitance over here. Perhaps this question is slightly tricky, right? There are some options that seem very similar. How do we use them in this sentence? Okay. So I hope you have your answers on hand because I'm about to go through. Alright, so no cheating. No cheating. Make sure you have your answers first before I go through. Okay, and let me know later if you got it correct. Okay. So this is a question that takes the form of a conditional statement. If something, then something. So if something, whatever comes in this blank over here must be in the simple tense. Whatever verb comes here must be in the simple tense. In addition, in order to know the verb tense of this, it must take reference from the second half of the sentence. We see would over here. Would is the past tense of will, right? Would is the past tense of will. So that informs this blank over here that it must also be in the past tense. Okay, so two rules to follow. First rule, simple tense in the conditional if statement. Okay. If something, that verb must always be in the simple tense. Second rule to follow, it must be in the same tense as the second half of the sentence. Second half of sentence. In this case here, the second half of the sentence is would. Would tells us that this is the past tense. Okay, so by these two rules, you know that answer must be in the simple past tense. And the only option that fits this criteria is option 1, new. Okay. Did you get it correct? Who got it correct? Show me a thumbs up or smiley face if you got it correct for this question. Right, well done. Well done for those that got it right. Okay, this is definitely not a simple question because there are many of these very obscure rules that you perhaps don't think about when you try to answer it. Okay. So perhaps with this practice and going through this question in detail, you have a better understanding of why we use certain verb tenses when we answer questions with conditionals. Any questions? Right, if there are no questions, that brings us to the end of our first set of 5 questions. I almost caught you there, right? You think it's the end of the live stream. Nope, we've just finished the first set of our 5 questions, but we're moving right on to the next set of 5 questions to wrap up our grammar MCQ. Okay, so these are the questions we've covered so far. Okay, feel free to take down any notes that you'd like. You can take a screenshot, you can take it down. You can write it down on the notebook by hand. If you want a copy of the notes over here, please feel free to visit online websites that carry these papers. Okay, this is one that's listed, but there are other online websites that you can download these papers from as well. Okay. So if you're interested, you can attempt this paper in your own time. And once you have gotten your answers, you can come back to this live stream over here to see if you match the correct answers that we have. Good. Okay, if there are no questions, perhaps let's move on. Question 6. Mr. and Mrs. Reyes blank sailing around the world for charity and will end their journey next month. So sailing around the world for charity. Okay. Will end their journey next month. So will end it next month tells us it's in the future tense. And we know that they are already sailing right now. They are sailing right now. They started sailing in the past. They are sailing right now. They will end it in the future next month. So the answer over here would be option 3. Okay? Option 3, have been. Okay? Have been sailing over here to indicate that it's continuous. Have over here because we have Mr. and Mrs. Reyes, right? Multiple people. Okay? So a plural subject to use for the blank. So well done, Rachel, for getting the right answer. For the others as well also, if you think you have the right answer for the following questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat as we discuss them together, alright? Okay, so well done, Rachel, getting a good head start. Question 7. By emerging first in a photography contest, I had won blank myself a pair of free tickets to the zoo. So this is a question on prepositions. Which is the correct preposition used over here? To have win. To win for yourself. Okay. I won for myself a pair of free tickets to the zoo. Okay. Why is it win for and not win by? Win by is used to indicate a method or a means of achieving this goal. Method or way? Well, win for yourself is something that you have won, whoever is benefiting over here. If you win something by yourself, that works also, but not in the context of this sentence. You're talking about what do you win for yourself. Okay, but thank you very much for the clarification over here. I think that also helps other viewers to understand how do we use certain conjunctions over here to better fit in the context of the sentence. Question 8. The newspapers are on that table. Blank, you need to refer to them to complete your project. The newspapers are on that table. Blank, you need to refer to them to complete your project. Okay, so what is the conjunction to fill it in with over here? So you need to fill in this blank with something that carries the idea of if, right? If you need to refer to them to complete your project. The correct conjunction that fills in this would be should. Should you need to refer to them to complete your project. Question 9. The student blank speech I like has been selected to represent the school in an oratorical contest. What is an oratorical contest first? Let's get this out of the way because I think people are curious about this. An oratorical contest is a contest about speeches, making a speech. Okay, so public speaking contest. The student blank speech I like has been selected to represent the school. In this case here, we are supposed to use the possessive pronoun of whose. Okay. What is a possessive pronoun? A possessive pronoun is used to indicate ownership. A possessive pronoun is used to indicate ownership over a certain item, to indicate a sense of belonging. And in this case over here, you are referring to the speech over here. Who does this speech belong to? It is belonging to this student, whose speech I liked, whose speech I enjoyed. Finally, question 10. Question 10 is a tricky one. Alright, so let me start it out for call attention to it. Question 10 is not only is it a tricky question, it is also a very popular question. Maybe it's popular because it's tricky, maybe it's tricky because it's popular, but either ways, there's a very good chance you'll be seeing this in your school exam papers and for PSLE. You have to admit that the idea is original, blank you. So this is a question that follows a form called a question tag. It's made up of two sections. The first section is what is known as your main statement. The main statement is a short sentence that can be read as a complete sentence by itself. You have to admit that the idea is original. Right? You can read it as a statement by itself. However, what is slightly different about this main statement is that you change it slightly by adding on a little question tag by the end of it. A question tag has two parts. The first part is a verb. The second part is a subject, or also known as the person. Where do you find a verb? Where do you find a subject in the question tag? You need to refer back to your main statement. In your main statement, your subject over here is you, right? You is the subject. Okay. And that is the case also for the question tag. We also have you as the subject, so no issue over here. How about verb? How do we answer the verb? In this case here, the verb from here needs to follow two rules. The first rule to follow, it needs to be the same tense as the main statement. Let's look at the main statement. You have to admit that the idea is original. What is the tense in the main statement here? The tense over here is present tense, right? I hope no one here is confused. Why is it present tense? Okay. Have to admit idea is original. All these point to the present tense. Second rule you need to follow. Second rule to follow, it must be the opposing verb. What do I mean by opposing verb? That means it needs to be the opposite action. Let's go back to our main statement. What is the verb in our main statement? What is the verb in our main statement? Is have the verb? Is have the verb over here? If you're reading it from left to right, you come across have, you think, oh yes, that's the first verb in the statement, that is the main verb. But you have made a mistake because you see, have to. What do you mean when you say have to? Have to means need to, right? You need to, you must. And must is actually an adverb. Okay? It modifies the verb that follows after it. So actually, have to isn't the verb in question. The verb in question actually comes from admit. Okay, that is the verb we should be looking at over here. Okay, so be careful of this trap over here. The students that attempted this paper tend to mess up. Okay, yes. Yes, thank you for clarification over here. It is a modal, not an adverb. It depends on the usage, but in this sentence, yes, I agree, it is a modal. So thank you for the clarification. Admit over here is the verb that we should be looking at. So the opposite of admit would be to not admit, right? To admit versus to not admit. So we need to find an answer that is not admitting in the present tense. Among our 4 options over here, looking at option 4, wouldn't. Wouldn't is a contraction of would not. Would not, would. Would is in the past tense, right? So we cannot use this. This is out of consideration. So no. Haven't. Have not. Have not. We are not looking at the correct verb over here. So off. Now we're looking at will not, do not. Since do not admit, simple present tense of admit, the idea of it is not admit. The simple present tense of this would be do not. And thus the answer that we use is option 1, don't. Is there a question? Okay, so as you can see, this is a pretty tricky question to unpack. Many students get tripped up along the different parts of the question, so you have to be careful to slowly unpack it to answer the question correctly. And if you're stuck along the way, what I always find helpful is to eliminate options that you know are wrong in the process. For example, if I reach that one over here, I'm looking for answers that are in the same tense. I can eliminate would not because I know it is in the wrong tense. Okay, so along the way, as you eliminate some of the options, it helps you to reduce your search space. And if you have to truly guess the answer at the end, now you're only guessing from 1 in 3, not 1 in 4. So that increases your odds slightly. Okay. Yes, but this is definitely a tricky question. Okay. For those that have gotten it right, good job. For those that perhaps are finding the questions a bit tough, okay, it's a good thing that you tune in for the live stream so that we can be able to clarify these questions together. Are there any questions? Okay. Right, if there are no questions, that brings us to the end of our grammar MCQ. But if you are struggling with grammar, don't worry, we'll be going through our grammar closed passage later on. Okay, so tune in later, we have our grammar closed passage, but for now, we'll be switching gears over to vocab. Vocab will also cover 10 MCQ questions just like grammar. However, there will be a slight change or slight adjustment in format. What we will see in our vocab questions. Vocab MCQ will span 10 MCQ questions. However, they are split along 2 lines. The first is what we have seen just now for grammar, a series of fill in the blank questions. You'll be given a statement with a blank. You need to fill in the blank with the correct word. Okay. So that will carry 5 marks. 5 fill in the blank questions. The second style of questions you'll come across in your vocab MCQ will be your substitution questions, also known as your replacement questions. As the name implies, you will be given a sentence with one of the words or maybe a phrase, a few words underlined. You need to replace the underlined words with the correct substitution among the options provided. Again, this will also cover 5 questions for a total of 5 marks. Some questions will be harder than others, but at the end of the day, all questions carry the same mark. So at any point in time, if you come across some words that you're unfamiliar with or you don't know, please do not hesitate to skip the question. Alright, time management is important in the exam for exam answering techniques. Whether it's an easy question or a difficult question, they all carry the same mark. Okay, so focus on the easier questions first, and for the difficult questions, you can spend some time on it afterwards to unpack and analyze the question. And to unpack and analyze, let's look at question 1. The man blanked the rope tightly as he was afraid that he would fall. We see 4 motions over here, or 4 actions all relating to an action. How do they differ and how should they be used in the context? There were some very active respondents during the grammar section just now. I hope they can chime in as well for the vocab section. Or perhaps if there are viewers who are struggling a bit with grammar, but you think vocab is your forte, this is now your chance to shine. Okay? Which of these 4 verbs over here carry the meaning of the sentence? Okay, so perhaps some of these words are words we may not have come across. First, I see an answer from Tambi, really quick. How about the others? Do you agree with Tambi? Do you disagree with Tambi? But let me go through them individually. To haul. To haul is to lift or carry something heavy. For example, every morning when my alarm clock rings, I need to haul myself out of bed, right? Because I want to sleep more. So you lift or carry yourself out of bed. To lug comes from the idea of luggage, right? If you go traveling, you have to carry your luggage. You have to bring along your luggage with you. So to lug is to pull something with a lot of effort. To clasp. To clasp is to hold or to grip something tightly. To hold something tightly usually between your arms, between your hands, between your limbs. To hold something tightly between your hands. And finally, option 4, to drag. To drag is to pull something along a surface. What is the difference between lug and drag over here? In this case here, lug has an additional element or an additional nuance of effort being expended in its effort. However, dragging, you do not necessarily need to expend effort. For example, you could say, I drag the chair across the floor, right? You drag the chair is not too heavy, but it rather talks about you pulling it across the surface of the floor. Okay, so that's the slight difference between lugging and dragging. So if all our definitions up on screen over here for our benefit, which do we think best fits the answer of the blank? Okay. I think, as correctly pointed out, clasp will be the answer over here because we're talking about the man holding onto the rope tightly with his hands because he was afraid he would fall. So good job, Tambi, for getting the right answer. And for the others also, feel free to chime in with your answers even after we've gone through the definitions, alright? It's okay if we don't have the answers right sometimes, but it's good that we clarify any misunderstandings we've had along the way. The only bad answer is a non-answer, alright? Every answer, wrong or right, will also be useful in our learning. Question 12. Jamila blanked after learning that she was not selected as the star pupil. Okay, so this is a pretty tricky question because it covers idioms, right? What are idioms? Idioms are common sayings that are meant to be taken literally, figuratively, not literally. Starting off with the first idiom, to break the ice. Okay, to break the ice, that means to get to know each other, to get to know strangers. For example, on the first day of school, my new classmates and I broke the ice and discussed about our favorite topics of discussion. Number 2, to sit on the fence. To sit on the fence is to be undecided about a decision. To pull a long face. To pull a long face is to look glum or to look sad, to look depressed. And finally, to shed crocodile tears. What does it mean to shed crocodile tears over here? To shed crocodile tears, that means to be insincere. To be insincere, to be non-genuine, in your sorrow. To be insincere in your sorrow. Among these answers over here, which best captures the idea of Jamila learning that she was not selected as the star pupil? Okay. Putting yourself in Jamila's shoes, how would you feel if you're not selected as the star pupil? You'd probably feel a bit disappointed. You'd probably feel a bit sad. So the answer that best captures Jamila's feelings would be option 3, to pull a long face. Okay. So these idioms over here, even though only one of them is correct answer for this question, for another question, perhaps another one of the options could be the correct answer. So it's important to keep idioms in mind. It's important to learn how do we use idioms in our writing as well, so that we can be able to understand what they mean. Question 13. Oh, can move some away. Question 13. The water in the tank was so blank that we could not see the fishes clearly. Okay. This is a pretty tricky question because all the 4 adjectives all relate to a certain degree of light, or rather a lack of light. So how should we answer this question? Okay. I see Noreen coming in with the answer of option 4. Do we agree with Noreen over here? Okay. Why not options 1, 2, and 3? How are they different? Oh, I'm shaking. Starting off with option 1. Option 1, dim. Dim refers to a lack of light. Okay. For example, I turned on the light when I entered the dim room. A lack of brightness. An absence of brightness, I would say. Okay. Yes, exactly. Dim is used for lighting. How about dull? Is dull used for lighting? Dull can be used for lighting, but not about light intensity. Rather, it's talking about a lack of shine, a lack of color. For example, the walls of the room were painted with a dull gray. Okay, so dull refers to a lack of shine, a lack of color. So slight difference over here. Dim is for light intensity, dull is for color and shine. How about hazy and murky? Both hazy and murky are used for unclear conditions, right? Unclear visibility. When do we use hazy? When do we use murky then? In this case here, the distinction lies in its medium. Hazy is used for air quality or memories. I tried to recall what happened, but my memory was hazy. However, murky is used for water quality or liquids. I drank some murky liquid that was lying in my cup. So yes, as correctly pointed out by Noreen, hazy is used for the atmosphere, used to describe the air quality, while murky is used to describe water, bodies of water, liquids. In this case over here, we're looking at water in the tank. So since we need to answer water in the tank, the closest match over here would be murky. Murky describing the unclear visibility of the tank water. So well done Noreen, well done Rachel for getting the right answers. Option 14. Since the 2 movies are screened blank, we have no choice but to choose one. So we have no choice but to choose one, gives us some context or gives us some background knowledge about the two movies. In what situation we need to choose between two movies? In what situation would we be forced to make a choice between two movies that are playing? When they happen to be playing at the same time. Right? So I hope everyone has reached this conclusion. The movies are unfortunately being played at the same time. Unfortunately, we can only be in one place at a time, so we can only watch one of the movies at a time. And among these four adverbs over here, which is used to indicate the idea of things happening at the same time? Okay. Right, so between consecutively and simultaneously, consecutively talks about one thing happening after the next in sequence. You could say my family members consecutively fell ill from COVID. One after the other, we all fell ill from COVID, right? So in sequence. While simultaneously means happening at the same time. Okay, so the closest match over here would be option 4, simultaneously. If the movies were playing consecutively, that means they were screened one after the next. You could watch both at the same time. You don't have to choose one. It's just that perhaps you'll be feeling a bit tired during the second movie. You might fall asleep. Okay? But to be consecutive, that means to be in sequence. And finally, question 15. Look this up. You're sneezing non-stop. I think you may be blank a cold. Okay? So we have 4 options over here. These are all examples of what we call phrasal verbs. What are phrasal verbs? Phrasal verbs are phrases, short sequences of words that when read together form a single action or verb. So these are all examples of phrasal verbs. Among these 4 phrasal verbs over here, which is best used to describe someone contracting an illness or having a cold, starting a cold? Okay. So to contract a cold is to come down with a cold. That is the correct phrasal verb usage over here. To come down with a cold, to come down with an illness. If this is something unfamiliar to you, perhaps this is why phrasal verbs are used vary depending on their context. Okay, so be mindful of phrasal verbs. Read widely, read not just storybooks, read widely for your news reports, read your newspapers, current affairs, see how and take note of how phrasal verbs are being used to signify certain actions and how they are joined together in certain contexts. Okay. Are there any questions? Alright, on to our next section. Our next section moves on from fill in the blank to substitution. Right, as we mentioned earlier, we're looking from fill in the blank to substitution. So we're looking to substitute certain words in our passage. Gina loved bats. Gina loved bats. In fact, she had 20 bats hanging out around her house. She did not live in a bat cave. On the contrary, she lived in a house that turned up into a bat shelter by night. The first one we need to replace over here, on the contrary. So we need a conjunction that indicates a contrast. Okay. Right, thank you very much, Noreen, for following the live creator. Hopefully this practice paper is something you might find useful or relevant for your learning. On the contrary, she lives in a house. We're looking for a conjunction that indicates contrast. Okay. Looking at question 16, we have instead, likewise, therefore, and furthermore. Which of these 4 options best indicate the contrast? Contrast. Contrast, that means two ideas that are opposing each other. For example, she did not live in a bat cave. On the contrary, she lived in a house that turned out to be a bat shelter by night. So she did not live on the contrary, she lived in a house. That means that although she did not live in a bat cave, she lived in a house that turned into a bat shelter by night. So ideas that are in opposition into each other. And so for this option over here, we should be using the conjunction of instead. Instead over here indicates that whatever comes after it is in direct contrast or is in opposition to the statement that precedes it. For example, I did not go to school, instead I stayed at home. Okay, so two ideas that are in contrast to or in opposition to each other. She lived in a house that turned into a bat shelter by night. You will not find these little creatures relaxing on benches, but you might find one or two of them snuggling up to Gina. Okay? So to relax, we're looking at these four options. Which of the four best covers the idea of relaxing? Okay? Think about the little creatures, the little bats, relaxing on the benches, snuggling up to Gina. Which of these four verbs carries that image or idea? In this case here, you're looking at relaxing. Relaxing would be to lounge. Okay? Relax, to lounge. Why is it not the rest? To huddle. To huddle is to squeeze together tightly. It refers to a group squeezing together tightly. For example, we huddle around the teacher to better hear their explanation, right? So we huddle around. To snooze and to hibernate is to take a nap. To snooze is to take a short nap, while a hibernate is to take a long slumber. So just a difference in length. At her home, Gina had taken care of bats with injuries such as a broken wing. She had also cared for bats that were left behind for the winter because they did not travel south before low temperatures set in. Okay, so looking for the verb or looking for the word that carries the idea of being left behind. Among these four options, which is used to indicate being left behind? Think about being left behind over here, which could be used to fill in this blank. So I've gotten a couple of questions beforehand. Why is it not isolated? Isolated, that means to be left excluded, to be left alone. While to be detained. To be detained is to be imprisoned. However, we're looking for the answer over here, which is stranded. To be stranded is to be abandoned in some place where you have no means to get out of. To be abandoned. To be left behind. Okay. So well done for those that gotten it right. For those that have struggled with it, why is it not trapped? In this case here, there wasn't an intentional act of trapping someone. When you trap someone, usually there's an act of intention, of purpose behind it, right? However, in this case here, the other bats were not intentionally leaving the smaller bats behind. Rather, they were just left behind due to not being able to fly south for winter. Okay. With the help of a vet, Gina nursed these winged mammals back to health and then set them free. When Gina was little, she grew up on a farm where bats were a common sight. Looking for a word to replace common, which adjective replaces common here? We have the adjectives of rare, unique, familiar, and surprising. Rare, unique, familiar, and surprising. Yep, this one is, I think it's a pretty simple one. The one that is clearly different from the rest is familiar. So well done, Jangoline and Noreen, for getting the right answers. To be familiar, to be a common sight. Hence, it was no surprise how quickly she took to an orphaned baby bat she found squeaking on the ground outside her house. To take to. What does it mean to take to over here? Again, this is another example of a phrasal verb. To take to is a phrasal verb. Which of these four verbs over here are a suitable replacement for the phrasal verb of taking to? This can be tricky if you're not familiar with this phrasal verb. Okay, so perhaps there's some unfamiliarity regarding how do we use take to a sentence. Let's use it this way. Once I started learning to play table tennis, I took to the sport easily. Okay? Once I started learning table tennis, I took to the sport easily. Once I started learning badminton, I took to the sport easily. Okay? What does took to mean in this case? In this case here, to take to, or the past tense took to, like we see in the sentence over here, it means to take a liking. Take a liking, take an interest. Okay. Take a liking or interest in something. Hence, from this definition of the phrasal verb, which of the four options best carry the idea of taking a liking or interest to the orphaned baby bat? Yep, that would be option 1, liked. Okay. So favorite and preferred aren't quite the case. Let me explain the rest why it isn't first. To be favored or to be preferred is to choose or select among other options. However, there was a list of options presented to Gina. She was just looking at one orphan baby bat. So that's why we do not use favored or preferred. How about welcomed? Why do we not use welcomed? Why do we use liked in this case? Okay. In this case here, welcome usually signifies when you're introducing a new guest or introducing someone new to your environment. That isn't really the meaning of the sentence over here. The sentence really is referring to how Gina started taking an interest in the orphan baby bat when she found it squeaking on the ground outside, and how she immediately fed it goat's milk that follows right after. Okay? So the closer match to this exact phrasal verb over here would be to like. So this can be a bit tricky sometimes. What if the context or the background information surrounding the question seems to contradict with the question words that we need to replace? In that situation, the underlying word takes precedence. It overrides the context questions over here. Okay? So if you're ever stuck wondering whether or not you should use the context clues or the immediate word, if it is a phrasal verb, always look to the direct substitution of the phrasal verb definition. Okay. I understand it can be pretty tricky, but this is something that we should keep in mind. Any questions? Because if there aren't any questions, perhaps it's good that we can shift gears over to grammar close again, right? We've done quite a bit of vocab over here. Let's take a look at grammar close. Once again, if anyone is interested, today we're taking a look at the Tao Nan P5 end of year paper from 2023. Okay, so if you want to have a copy of the notes or you wish to try out these questions by yourself, please feel free to find the resources online. Let's start. For our grammar close, there will be a box with 15 options. You have to use only each option once to fill in the blanks. Parents and educators have been worrying about the dying out of handwriting for years. The reason? Smartphones and laptops have led blank some schools spending less time on teaching the fine art of writing. Okay. So what is the correct option over here? Have led blank some schools spending less time on teaching the fine art of writing. You can indicate your answer with the alphabet or the letter of choice. Which is the letter of choice to fill in question 29? Okay. Right, to lead to. Okay, good job. Okay. Good job, Eminem. Well done. To have led to some schools spending less time on teaching the fine art of writing. Sarah, a 10-year-old, blank used her handwriting skills to win blank national penmanship competition. Okay, so let's start with question 30 first. Sarah, a 10-year-old, blank used her handwriting skills. Which is the correct option over here? I think most of the viewers would converge around two answers that belong on the same column. But among these two answers, which is the correct fit and why? Okay, so Eminem has given up the answer G. We look at it was an impressive feat, which has us to inform the answer over here. It had used her handwriting skills. So well done for getting the right answer again. Had used her handwriting skills to win blank national penmanship competition. In this case here, we're looking for an article. An article over here that refers to non-specific, just a general competition over here, that would be option A. To win a national penmanship competition, it was an impressive feat, made even blank so. Even blank so, you're looking for a comparative here. Made even more so since she was born without hands. Writing, blank holding her pencil between the ends of her arms, Sarah was trained in the art of penmanship. Okay. Writing, blank holding the pencil. So writing, you need a option over here that best carries the idea of explaining a method or explaining a way, which would be the correct option to fill in this blank. Writing by, yes, writing by holding her pencil between the end of her arms. Sarah was trained in the art of penmanship by a teacher, and blank, she knew it. She began to love writing. Okay. So this is an expression. Before she knew it, she began to love writing. Sarah's teacher told her parents, "Your girl can do just about anything." Again, this is an expression to say you can do just about anything. At the National Handwriting Contest, the judges were so impressed with her perfect penmanship, blank, they awarded her the top prize. They were so impressed, blank, they awarded her the top prize. Okay, so this is a bit of S&T over here. You should fill this up with that was so impressed that they awarded the top prize. Sarah won a trophy and $500 of prize money. Although she had blank to decide what she wanted to do with her prize money, she was going to save half of it. So although she had not decided what to do with it, right? So she had not decided, she had yet to decide. Well done, Eminem once again. She had yet to decide what she wanted to do with prize money. She was going to save half of it. To blank, if anyone tries their hardest, they could do it. What remarkable spirit. So to who? To Sarah here, right? You're looking at Sarah over here. So what pronoun over here is used to refer to Sarah? What pronoun should we use for Sarah here? To her. Okay, option J. To her, if anyone tries their hardest, they can do it. What remarkable spirit. Are there any questions? Okay. So I think this close passage, this grammar close, isn't too tricky. Difficulties would be question 36 for the S&T portion. 34 for the expression before she knew it, because it is something that you might not have come across before. And finally, question 31, there will be some discrepancy. Some students will argue that it's option N, the National Penmanship Competition. Some will correctly identify that it is option A. Okay, so these are 3 questions that students tend to mess up on. Alright, and with that, we are moving on to our final section for today. We'll be wrapping things up today with editing. For your editing passage, you are tested on 2 core skills. Editing, you'll be tested either on grammar, so either a change in word form, word tense, or even subject-verb agreement, right? If it's singular, if it's plural, should you use the verb change? And it'll also test you on your spelling. Spelling, look out for silence letters that have double consonants in the middle of a word, or the ending consonants of words. So you'll be tested on spelling or grammar. Let's get started. Kim woke up in the morning, listening to the birds and bugs. He walked to school, admiring flowers and trees on mountains and breath in fresh air. So what should be the correct verb over here? This should be a change in word form, right? A change in tense, sorry. Okay. What should the correct tense be over here? In this case here, we take reference from the verb that comes before it. Admiring flowers and breathing in fresh air. Okay. Well done, Noreen, getting the right answer after some time. Okay. Well done, Noreen. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the student from the Korean city transferred to a new rural school. Okay. So this is a tense mistake again. During the COVID-19 pandemic, which took place in the past. So the blank over here should be in the past tense. So there will be transfer for double R-E-D. Okay. Transferred. Okay, so well done, Eminem. Getting the right answer. Transferred to a rural school. Having attended online classes the whole of the previous years. So having attended online classes, you're looking at a change in tense. Having attended. as correctly pointed out by Eminem once again, and Noreen also getting the right answer. So both of you, well done. Have you attended online classes the whole of the previous year? Kim's mother said, even if the children could go to school for the first time in a long time, they couldn't talk freely to friends. Thus, she opting to have their son study in the countryside. So again, once again, this is a tense mistake over here. Opting should be opted. Okay, past tense. She opted to have a son study in the countryside where he could roam around and be intrigued by nature. Okay, now we finally reach a spelling mistake. How should you spell intrigued? Well done, Eminem. This is not an easy word to spell, right? There are normally additional or missing vowels in the middle. So for those who spell it right, like Eminem, well done. Intrigue. It's an I. The UED goes to the back. Many students living in the city have also chosen to study in rural schools. They looked forward to learning in a natural environment, savoring seasonal food and building relationships with our new classmates. Okay. So this is a point of view error over here. We're looking at the third person. It should be there. Yep, their new classmates. It took a while for Kim to agree to give the experience a try. Experience is spelled wrongly over here. To give the experience a try and move to the village. Believe it or not, believe is a spelling mistake. Believe it or not, now he has applied to stay in the countryside until the pandemic is over. Okay, so until is a spelling mistake. How do you spell until? Right, until is spelled with a single L. Okay, so be mindful of that point. Until just has a single L at the back. Okay, well done, Noreen. Well done, Eminem. Kim can discover nature at many ways, which she finds fascinating. Okay, so at over here is the wrong choice of word over here for grammar. What is the correct preposition we should use here? Yep. In many ways, he finds fascinating. Fascinating has a C in the middle. I can play with my friends and be fully immersed in the learning despite the pandemic, Kim said. Immersed? How should you spell immerse? Immerse starts off with an I, right? I double M. Take note, double M. ERSED. Okay, so well done, Noreen and Eminem, for getting the right answers. Recently, I harvested some sweet potatoes. What a lot of fun. Right? So that brings us to the end of our editing passage and also the end of today's live stream for our practice paper. Thank you very much for joining us for our practice paper this afternoon. If you're interested, stay tuned. We'll be able to take a look at other sessions later on in the afternoon. All right? Otherwise, that is it for section. What is great is this. This is the Primary 5 paper for Tao Nan School from 2023. But I think, as some of our viewers can attest to after going through the paper today, the questions are definitely not at the P5 level. Some of the questions can be pretty tricky, right? Okay, so although this is set for Tao Nan School P5 students, it can be quite difficult. Eminem, you said it's P5. Is there a good question? Is there a good exclamation or bad exclamation? As in, do you find it too easy for P5 or too difficult for P5? Right, so definitely some of the questions, especially for the vocab section, some of the vocabulary and words might be unfamiliar to the P5 students or even for older students or viewers. Okay, so this is something that is always good to tune into because we have always brush up on our fundamentals for language, right? And I think some of us were not in the stream during the vocab section just now. So if anyone is interested, here were the notes from the vocab earlier. If I could draw anyone's attention, I would draw everyone's attention to questions 12 and 13. 12 and 13 can be tricky because the final distinctions between each of them need to be clearly carried out. Okay? So questions 12 and 13 are pretty tricky for this point. Do you have any burning questions that I can answer or I can address from our chat? Any questions or clarifications about what we've covered in today's live stream session? Right, so some students might find the grammar section tricky, others might find the vocab section harder. In this case here, how do you go about answering it? In this case, it is always important to read widely and to read from a diverse range of sources. What I mean, instead of just reading fiction, instead of just reading storybooks, also try to spread out, read some non-fiction, read your newspaper articles, read your current affairs so that you can get a grasp of how certain vocabulary and certain phrasal verbs are being used regularly in the context of the sentence, in the context of the article. Okay? So this gives you a greater sense of general knowledge that you can apply across broader fields, and also definitely helps in your exams as well. Okay. Right. And as we wind down today's session, once again, thank you very much everyone for joining us today for our noontime practice paper session. And if you were here earlier for our reading session earlier this morning, thank you very much for joining us since earlier this morning. Okay. And we had we had a reading session earlier this morning for those that are wondering. Yes, at 10:30 we had a reading session this morning talking about atomic habits, and we went through a couple of news articles. In news articles, we also took a look at some expressions and phrasal verbs, so that helped us for our practice paper today as well. So if you're interested, we have reading sessions usually in our morning, and then for our noontime sessions, we go through some practice papers. Okay, our schedules are available online, but if you're unable to make it due to your busy timetables, no worries. You can always find short snippets and highlights of our live streams on our TikTok page. Just click the link on the bio. You'll be directed to our TikTok page where we carry both a range of short form and long form videos that cover useful exam tips, answering techniques, and exam answering skills. Okay. If you'd like to see the face behind the cameras, the teachers who are working hard to ensure to create quality work and to help you along the way, feel free to check out our YouTube channel. In our YouTube channel, we have a series of very enlightening videos by some of our most experienced and professional teachers going through popular questions from your practice papers just from 2023 PSLE and O levels. Okay, so this is something that you will find especially useful in your revision moving forward. We are also contactable on, I believe, Instagram and Xiaohongshu. So if any of your friends are interested or you're interested to find out more about our content and what we carry out on these platforms, please feel free to check out our links on our link tree. And finally, if you're interested in any of our online content, you'll find out more about organization, you can check out our e-store to check out some of our example sample practices and practice papers that we have on our e-store. Okay. There are some samples available for free, but if you like a greater selection, there are some bundles that are at a promotional price, so you can take a look at those as well. Okay. Otherwise, that is all for today. Thank you very much for joining in. We'll see you in the next session.